Good afternoon, and thank you, Terry, for that generous introduction. I'm honored to address you all this afternoon. I'd like to begin with a story. The year is 13,000 BC. The first human migrants to America are about to cross the land bridge between eastern Russia and Alaska, but unfortunately, their navigator seems a bit lost. "Are you all right?" they ask him. "Yeah, I think so," he replies. "I just need to get my bearings straight." Now, the problem with the Zoom joke is that you can't hear everybody laugh, so I'll supplement because I'm too shy to laugh at my own jokes. Although I live in the Quad Cities now, my story begins in Dubuque, my birthplace. Or more accurately, my story in Dubuque began before my birth. My mom's great-grandmother stepped off a Mississippi River steamboat to settle near Hanover, Illinois. Maybe that's really more accurately where my Midwest story starts. And what about you? You're descended either from that migrant band that crossed the Bering Strait or else from an immigrant. This afternoon, focusing on migrants and immigrants, I'd like to show you a new reason why the Lantern Center is perhaps more important than you realized. Share some stories and images from the border, and reflect on how those stories affect us here in the Midwest. History shows that the United States has flourished thanks to immigrants, but you may not know that today a big shift is underway almost silently in America. According to this recent publication from the nonpartisan nonprofit Heartland Forward, this shift is changing America's heartland. That is the area between the Appalachians and the Rockies, the green on the map, in communities like Dubuque. Immigrants who originally settled much of this land came mainly from Scandinavia and Northern Europe, like my great-great-grandmother. Since the 1920s, immigrant newcomers have essentially dried up. As decades passed, local residents tended to leave, but few newcomers came in from the outside. However, over the last 10 years, the Heartland's share of the nation's foreign-born population has risen significantly. It's up from 23.5% in 2010 to over 31% in 2019. In fact, in Des Moines, Iowa, immigrant populations grew more than 40%, helping reverse population decline. Foreign-born populations are growing faster in the heartland now than at New York or LA, the important immigrant hubs of the past. In Dubuque, the number of foreign-born residents is lower than the national average, but the rate of gain has increased. This makes the Lantern Center perfectly positioned. Its mission is even more important now than when it opened as the only welcome center for adult immigrants in or around Dubuque. Now it can bring 20 years experience to this significant immigrant influx. That's a positive for the tri-state area's future. And just as important, the hospitality it provides is life-sustaining to people who sometimes arrive without much support at all. I know about that kind of support from volunteering on the US-Mexico border. 15 years ago, my husband and I were curious and concerned about immigration down there, so we began spending months there each year, learning about and helping migrants. The border gives me incredible access to migrants, immigrants, and would-be immigrants. Opportunities range from formal presentations to conversations while washing dishes. I feel fortunate. But when people in Iowa first learn about my border work, their initial reactions don't necessarily reflect that I'm lucky. Sometimes they look surprised or maybe respectful, and often they respond with a cringe-looking worried Scared for me. To reassure them, I explain, I'm surrounded by fabulous people there. The other volunteers are tremendous. The dedicated humanitarian aid staffers are amazing, and the migrants themselves inspire me every day. Serving 100 to 200 migrants a meal in a crowded room, I realize that each of them is facing a personal crisis at that moment. Each one is far from home, must carry everything they own, has no personal transportation. Many also care for children or minors. Others are supporting elders. Everyone is hoping against hope, and everyone is vulnerable. And yet, all's calm. People are pleasant and courteous. They present their personal needs humbly. This isn't the perspective we get from the news, where migrants are depicted as invading criminal hordes. Truthfully, it's the opposite. Most days I go home touched, impressed, and inspired. As the day that this migrant, who was just a stranger in the crowd over on the edges, silently crafted this flower from a palm branch, slipped up next to me, and wordlessly slipped it to me. Another time, near the end of the help session, I was standing by the exit when suddenly a young woman hurried toward me with wide eyes, a huge smile, and outstretched arms. Dangling between her hands was a necklace that she'd just removed from her own neck. "You must have this," she exclaimed. Apparently elated at the help she'd received, she wanted to share too. I hadn't done a thing for her, but unsure in that moment how I could refuse without insulting her, I kept the necklace. I use it now to remind me what generosity looks like. As in the gospel story of the widow's mite, that young woman gave me the loveliest thing that she had, and it's a heart. The assistant center administrator, Sister Cecilia, had better control of an exchange that I observed. A man who received a pair of secondhand shoes extended his outstretched hand to her. "I don't have much money," he said simply and humbly, "but I did receive these few coins yesterday. I'd like to give them to you." Sister Cecilia declined by kindly assuring him that services at the center were free for all. But later, reflecting on it, I had to wonder, if I were hundreds of miles from home, far away from a safe destination, would I offer the few coins I had in my pocket? Truthfully, no. I fall short of that. Family values motivate many immigrants. They want their children to survive, to escape imminent danger and violence. And like good parents everywhere, they want their children to have some opportunity, some education, which we teach the migrants is a human right. We see loving family interactions constantly. 5 years ago, not everyone traveled with a cell phone. One of my favorite jobs was to offer to place free phone calls to migrants' family or friends back home or to where they were headed. One day, as a husband spoke to his wife in a Central American country, his little son scrambled up and pressed his ear close to listen for a scrap of the sound of his mother's voice. Migrants' love of family is a value that strengthens the United States. When there's work to do, people pitch in, even though we don't pay them. The migrants I know are pleased to have a job. They want a chance to work. These photos show the intensity of focus and energy they bring to get the job done. It's no wonder that hardworking immigrants compose a major component of our nation's most labor-intensive workforces, as seen on this slide. These are huge percentages. After 25 years in the United States, this undocumented farm worker was deported for driving without a license. When I knew one, he was far from his homeland in southern Mexico, working a low-wage job on the northern Mexico border so he could afford an apartment there so his 2 US citizen sons from Phoenix could occasionally make the 4-hour drive down to visit him. But injured at that low-wage job, he suffered chronic pain. So he volunteered at our center in exchange for meals. Juan knew pain, exile, poverty, and his greatest trial was missing his wife and his 6 and 14-year-old boys. Yet this is the Juan we saw every day joking. We loved to see him arrive because his teasing made workdays hilarious. You wouldn't know he had a care in the world. And he never stopped until all the work was finished. Bravery and strength like Juan's is in so many migrants that I began to name this tenacious courage. I call it grace under pressure. And it's the magnificent ability to push through the unspeakable and continue. Migrants' impressive, quiet perseverance is so common. It's said that the person who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. Many migrants find their why, their faith, in their God. No matter how small the plan, I could say something as simple as, see you tomorrow. Often the response I receive from a migrant will be, yes, if God wills it. If God wishes it, peppers all the conversations. Prayer before meals at the soup kitchen is as sacred a moment as is felt in any church. The room stills, movement freezes, time stops. The migrants have little, few possessions, no assurances, many threats. They know in their bones that they need God. I respected these values that I had witnessed from the migrants across the years. Then 2 years ago, it was my turn to put what the migrants showed me into practice in my life. My husband, Paul Allen, was my inspiration and my partner in 25 years of exploring other countries and borders. 2 years ago, after a sudden, brief illness, he died. Losing a beloved spouse is one of the hardest events of anyone's life. I drew from the values of migrants I've witnessed. Surrounding yourself with good life teachers is a tremendous plus. I think migrants are the life teachers that our country needs. Over and over, history shows that immigrants are a net positive. Immigrants bring skills, labor, entrepreneurship, and ideas. The money they contribute to the economy adds to our tax base, raising our standard of living. They fill jobs that Americans can't or won't do. Their customs and culture enrich the diversity that makes our country dynamic and exciting. And their children tend to achieve even more than they do. Hospitable welcome of foreign-born newcomers will keep all this goodness flowing. Unfortunately, though, our border doesn't welcome. It looks like a war zone. This is how we look from Mexico. And it's worse on our side of the wall, covered with rolls of razor wire. Not a family-friendly environment, or business-friendly either. Policies are designed to keep people out. Migrants are subject to criminalization. When I began this work 15 years ago, unauthorized border crossing was a civil offense, much like getting a traffic ticket. Now, after years of escalation, it commonly merits a felony offense. Even legitimate asylum seekers, including moms and kids, are held in freezer-like conditions. When migrants are deported, we systematically rob them by issuing them a check to return their money that we confiscated, but they can't cash that check anywhere. So, how do we change course? First, and most importantly, you can speak up. You see, Americans are less trusting of national leaders and more trusting of people close to them. Evidence suggests that people are apt to believe what their peers and family members believe. So in any group to which you belong, you are the messenger best suited to reach people on a subject like immigration. In addition to one-on-one conversations, it's important to connect immigrant and American-born neighbors and bring them into community together. Getting people involved in the Lantern Center makes transformative relationships happen. Providing that opportunity is another gift that the Lantern Center gives Dubuque. We know, though, that often change is slow. As my husband, Paul, said, the journey is step by step, and you just have to keep repeating. It's a long journey, and we're not going to do it all today, or this year, or even in our lives. But that doesn't mean that we can't do what we do today, what we can do today. I recommend, as a source of personal accounts of migrants crossing the US-Mexico border, this book, Voices of the Border. It shares the experiences of migrants, refugees, and deportees. I watched interviews for it take place as migrants shared their experiences with Sister Ingracia, a woman I consider a wisdom figure. It's easy to purchase this online. Read it and form your own impressions. I don't profit from endorsing this book, but the book's proceeds do support the Migrant Assistance Center where I've helped. As I wrap up, I want to offer that if you have any questions or responses to what I've shared today, you can reach me at billy@borderpartners.org. But now I'd like to close with a reflection from Jesuit priest Greg Boyle. Let's remember and send light to all who are migrating. Borders are imaginary, human inventions that are invisible from space. We are all one.